One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to One Question, where we highlight executive leaders in college athletics. Our guest today is Jen Baker. Jen is the Senior Associate Athletics Director at Johns Hopkins University. Greetings, Jen. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Now, Jen, your role there is essentially a number two in the athletics department. You talk about handling budget, revenue, sports supervision, admissions, leadership development for student athletes, a number of things that are like internal, external, and everything in the history of athletics, right?
It is the beauty of a small staff.
Right, exactly. Now, we've talked a little bit, and one thing you told me that you have a passion for is the leadership development for student athletes. You actually do some side consulting with other athletics departments, other organizations outside of athletics on that whole leadership development and development culture. Tell me about how you've figured out a way to apply that to college athletics and athlete development.
So I had a bit of a non-traditional undergrad experience. I went to the Naval Academy and then started my career in the military. And I took it for granted, the experience I had at the Naval Academy was it's structured leadership development happens there, right? We have an entire academic building devoted to leader development. And the reason for that is because at the end of your 4 years there, they have to hire every single one of their graduates, and they have to put them in positions where they have responsibility for other people's lives and certainly very expensive equipment. And so they have to put those measures into place to kind of hedge their bets in terms of what they're going to get on the backside. They need people that they can trust to make the kind of decisions that are in the best interest of others and certainly in the best interest of the U.S. taxpayers, if nothing else. And when I marry that with athletics, I see a similar opportunity. Even the military is very well regarded for developing leaders, but the stakes are pretty high there at the same time. My experience in athletics has shown me that it is as solid a proving ground for leaders as I believe the military is. The difference is the stakes aren't quite as high, although I will argue that playing in a championship game, you can't make that argument in all cases there. But with that said, I feel like there's a real opportunity to kind of put a similar structure in place that allows athletes to realize what they're learning at the time they're learning it. I think any of us who's ever been an athlete understands that as part of your experience on a team, you are inherently learning leadership and teamwork skills. I think the challenge that I see in that is that you don't always have a conscious awareness of what it is that you're learning. It's sort of by osmosis and default, and then most of us, as we continue to move on past our athletic careers, at some point reflect back, and that's where we really start to make the connections and understand who we are as leaders and what we learned about ourselves in that capacity. I think we can do better. I think we can advance that timeline, and I think what we need to do is map the athlete's experience to what they're learning at the time, make it relevant for them, and give them an opportunity and a platform to practice just like any other skill and get better so that, A, in the short term, they're providing that incremental value to their teams, but B, for the rest of their lives, they can differentiate themselves as that great teammate, as that great leader, and have a real understanding of what it is they're doing and why they're doing it.
It's interesting you say you learn a lot when you're a student athlete or when you're playing sports, but you may not understand what you're learning at the time. So your thought process is to make sure you're intentional about them knowing exactly what they're learning at the time. Tell me about, without giving away the unique value proposition of your consulting agency, but tell me about how you do that and what you've done in terms of leadership development.
So the consulting has been very accidental. I am a freelance consultant at best, largely because I am an athletics administrator all in by day, right? And we all know that athletics administrators have precious little extra time, if you will. But I started getting calls as I initially built a comprehensive program for leadership development for student athletes at Cornell. And while I was in the process of doing that, and as we were continuing to implement and scale, I was starting to get calls from other schools wanting to know what we were doing and how we were doing it, because I think all of us in this profession recognize that there's a great opportunity to serve student athletes by building in leadership development elements. And with that really illustrated for me that schools want to do this, but the hardest part is to get it off the ground and to know where to start. That's a part that I like. So I'm an engineer by education. I like problem solving, and so for me, it's a reverse engineering of a problem. If you can tell me what the outcome is that you want, and I think most people can in terms of tell me what leaders do. Tell me what you need leaders to do. If you can tell me what those outcomes are, I can then reverse engineer that and give you the kind of the inputs along the way that will allow you to progressively build those skills in your athletes, ideally to get you to that output. And so that's really where I sort of found my niche in consulting, is helping people think through what that looks like. What's the outcome? And then giving them those pieces. And then in a perfect world, and I do this in partnership with a good friend and colleague who is down at the Naval Academy, Dr. Christine Copper. She and I piece this together, and then our model truly is train the trainers. We'll build the programming for you, and then we'll teach you how to deliver it so that you can continue to do it. Because it's really, in my mind, best delivered by people who are on campus every day and interfacing with the athletes, so the message isn't lost. And I love engaging coaches in the process. As we've built the program at Hopkins, we have coaches and staff members who are facilitators, so there are constant touch points and reinforcing touch points along the way with the programming. But the crux of the consulting has been that, and it's kind of morphed into different directions based on what people need. So I've worked with companies, I've worked with, although I do prefer to stay within athletics, because my premise really is taking the athletic experience and using that as a tool and a platform for leadership development. So while it certainly applies in a corporate arena, my sweet spot is in the athletics arena. But, individual coaches, individual teams, whole athletics departments, camps where people are identifying prospects and they want to build it in, developmental programs. Everybody knows there's a need for this. The challenge is not everybody knows how to do it or where to start with it.
You mentioned something there. Ask what kind of outcomes they want, dial that down, and then work backwards from there. For example, we want all the senior student athletes to have these traits or these characteristics. When you ask that question, when they're defining how they want their senior student athletes to be, are you helping people actually define the terms? Because there can be these theoretical terms that it's hard to define. But tell me about that process when you're actually working with somebody to define outcomes.
So I'm big on actions, right? So I believe, culture is expressed through actions, and I believe leadership is expressed through action. And you're exactly right. So case in point, and it's an example I use often, if somebody tells me, well, they work hard. Well, what hard work looks like to me and what hard work looks like to you, and by extension, if you have 30 athletes on your roster, what each of them interprets as hard work could be very different. And so I really try to force people to be specific in terms of, tell me what the trait is, tell me what hard work is, but if your senior athlete leader is working hard, tell me what I would be seeing. If I showed up at your practice, what would I see them do that actually illustrates that to me, so that tells me that they are achieving that standard, however you've defined it. And so I'm very big on, yes, tell me what the traits are, but describe to me what they're doing that let you know that they are actually putting those traits into action. And that's the process that we'll work through, get very clear and specific on that, and then we'll think about what are the underlying educational pieces that need to go into advancing that. Because, and this is how I frame it to coaches all the time, if you bring in a first-year student athlete, you recruit them for their potential, right? But they're not a finished product at that point. And you hope and you project what you think they can be as a senior on that team. What skills are they going to develop? What are they going to do in the weight room and everything in between? Well, the way they get from point A to point B is that you give them a framework to practice, and you give them opportunities to build those skills, and they're going to mess it up half the time or more than half the time, but then they're going to continue to get better. I think leadership is a skill the exact same way, but I think it's unreasonable for us to assume that seniors are just going to figure it out based on what they've seen prior to them, go before them. I think that they need to be introduced to it when they are first years, and then provided that same similar framework, just like you would have it as an athletic practice, to practice it and to mess it up and to learn from it and to continue to get better, so that by the time they're senior, they're really confident in who they are. And then more importantly, wherever they go next, they feel really confident stepping in, even as an entry-level employee, and really asserting themselves as a leader and as a teammate.
And you're giving them the opportunity to practice leadership as they grow.
Yeah, that's the way you get better at it, is by practicing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you go help out an athletics department, help out a coach with their program. And coaches have a tendency, they see something that works, they implement what you have them to do, and they'll stick with it. And that's what they'll do because it works, and I need to do this as a coach. It's within my habit to do this, and it helps me find success. Is there an ongoing evaluation, ongoing consulting, or do you help them that one time, they get it in place and they keep doing it? Tell me about.
I do whatever they want. I mean, honestly, it's not a good business model because I can't scale, because I refuse to do anything that's cookie cutter. It's really about working with people one-on-one and customizing it to what it is they need. If a coach wants something one-off, I'm never a big fan of one-off in general, because I just don't think it can have lasting ROI unless the coach can really take it and run with it and make sure they're implementing it day to day. That being the case, so for that reason, like, I do it, but I'm not. It's never my first choice to go like give a talk somewhere, right? Because my big thing is, if I give a talk, it's going to be a workshop, and kids are going to get a workbook, and I'm gonna make them leave and understand how they use it the very next day. I'm very big on that. So with that said, I'm not a big believer in the status quo. So if we do something and it works and it's great, I think we should stick with some of what that is, but I think we should always be reinventing. I don't care if you are winning the national championship every single year. In my mind, you got to keep innovating. You got to keep tweaking, and a lot of that has to be reflective of your personnel. One of the things that I find really unique about college athletics from a leadership standpoint and a challenge is that every year 50% of your team looks different, right? You graduate one class, you bring in a new class, and the core two in the middle are the ones that are still there. But you're in constant change management mode, right? Constant adaptation mode. So I think to the extent that coaches want continued feedback and they want continued engagement, I'm all in. But it's important to me that I give them the tools they need to do it on their own too. I'm not looking to be on every campus all the time, attending everybody's practices. I'm here to be a resource, but I also believe that we overcomplicate some of this stuff. And with just some kind of basic framework and structure, I think we can do this all ourselves.
Right, that's important, identify the outcomes. I do have another question here. You probably could do this for a living, but you choose to continue to work in athletics. Tell me about that decision.
There's no better job than working with student athletes and coaches every day, period, the end. I will say, with one caveat, my first job, so what I initially did out of the Naval Academy is I was a pilot, and that was all I'd ever wanted to do with my life, right? So I got to fly very fast jets and do some really badass fun stuff. That was an awesome job. And the people that I worked with every day were amazing, and it is a privilege to serve in the military and to be surrounded by others who are team above self, right? And that career ended prematurely for me. I was medically disqualified from flying early in my career, and I feel like in the time since, if you look at my resume, it makes zero sense. And I can explain it all to you, but I think part of it is I've constantly been looking for what it is that felt like that, right? A mission that I was excited about every day, and people that were a great fit from a cultural and kind of leadership teamwork standpoint, right? They had that same team over self mentality. I find that in college athletics, and I find that it's addictive. And I actually, I got into athletics late in life and got into athletics somewhat accidentally. It was really through this leadership path that I initially started down this road. But there was a year in between where I worked at Under Armour. And that was driven by my personal desire to geographically relocate, and Under Armour provided me the greatest opportunity to do that at the time. And within 3 months, and it was an experiment, right? It's an athletic company, it's exciting, it's engaging, there's so much cool stuff going on there. Within 3 months there, I knew I wanted to be back on a campus. Because again, even when I'm in an athletically related field, there's nothing that compares to helping student athletes realize what they can be and who they can be. And what I love about sports is that on any given day, it shows you who you are and who you can be, right? Which means it's always changing, it's always exciting, and I like to win, right? So there's always that opportunity to continue to drive towards improvement. And while the leadership stuff I'm very passionate about and I believe in with the core of my being, and maybe I could do that, I just described my model to you. I don't want to be there every single day. I want to help people do this for themselves because I know that they can. That's not going to take the place of being in an athletics department and working with a core group of people that you really have those deep relationships with, and standing on a sideline when your football team goes to a Division III Final Four for the first time in program history, right? Like that was amazing. I can't get that as a consultant. I'm super proud of all my clients. I really am, but it's different when you are part of that
when
department.
You're part of a team, a part of something like that. You're right, absolutely right. Well, Jen, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is fun. I told you I binge listened to your podcast on my trip down here, so this has been great.
I appreciate it. It makes me feel like a Netflix show or something like that, right?
Listen, I think you're big time when people are binging on stuff that you're doing. I think that's a good metric.
I don't know if I'm big time, but I do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
That was Jen Baker. She's the Senior Associate Athletics Director at Johns Hopkins University. And of course, this is Ty Brown with one question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.